Hey fellow Force users, what is up? It's Jasmine, the AhsokaTanoFan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So guys, first of all, happy May the 4th. I hope everyone's having a great day and overall a great weekend. And with May the 4th, we got the release of a brand new installment of the Tales saga, if you want to call it that, titled Tales of the Underworld, in which we got all new episodes centering around Bane and Ventress. So I was super stoked about this. Obviously, I did have a chance to watch the episodes, and dare I say it, I actually really liked Bane's episodes. I think even more so than Ventress's, which I'll get more into Ventress's episodes in another video. Although all the episodes were good, I just found that Bane's had a lot more depth in a way. But yeah, anyway, I don't know if anybody else got that feeling as well. Before we get into it, you guys can fast forward this part of the video if you want to, but I just wanted to address a couple things. You guys might notice that I have been doing some recap videos recently instead of reactions, and I just kind of wanted to address that. So the reason I've been doing that is because when episodes drop in bulk like this, reaction videos can be very time consuming, and just time consuming in general. And if I'm being honest with you guys, it can be very challenging to try and find the time to do it, to balance on top of my full-time job and everything else that's going on. And so even in the case of Andor, as much as it is exciting getting so much Star Wars content every week, having 3 episodes of Andor drop at once every week, it is so fun to watch, but as a reactor and content creator like myself, so difficult to keep up in terms of watching and reacting and reviewing and making those videos. Just for context, one Andor video to do a reaction to it would basically take me approximately 8 hours. So it's about 2 hours to film my intro, review, and my reaction, and approximately 6 hours of editing, give or take. And so when you have 3 episodes now, you do the math, that is almost a day's worth of editing in total. And yeah, it's just, as much as I wish that I could do that and have the time to do that, it is so difficult, like I said, balancing that on top of my full-time job. And in all honesty, guys, I don't even watch 3 hours of TV in a week normally, and now let alone doing that and trying to react to it and break it down like I normally do. It is tough. And I feel like Andor is such an incredible series, and it's so deep and symbolic, and there's just so much content there to break down. I really want to do it justice. And for that reason, I just really wish that they had stuck to the weekly release, like 1 episode at a time. I just think it allows, at least for myself, to really kind of break down each episode carefully, and it allows more speculation time as well. When they release it in the way that they have been, it's really hard to speculate, because you might have one episode have some type of cliffhanger or mystery, and then it makes you speculate what's going to happen in the next episode, but then in the next episode you might see that mystery solved. So in that situation, if I were to say, oh, I can't wait to see what happens in the next episode, well, meanwhile the next 2 episodes are already out, it takes away from the ability to speculate. So yeah, that's one reason why personally I'm kind of against anything dropping all at once. I really like just 1 episode each week to allow us the time to talk about it and predict and whatnot. So anyway, so that being said, with Andor, I don't know when my next video will be. I haven't even had a chance to watch this week's episode. It's just been so busy for me, but I am going to try at some point to recap the season and address what's been going on in the season, because I do think, like I said, it is a really great series, and I do want to talk about it with you guys, right? So anyways, just kind of bear with me. I ask for you guys to be patient while I just try and navigate this and figure out how to like make this content, but also to do so with the time that I have. That being said, with Tales of the Underworld, I also am going to do a recap style just because all 6 dropped at once. So yeah, anyways, I hope you guys can understand that. That being said, let's dive into the episode breakdown for Bane's episodes. I'm going a little bit out of order here because I know Ventress's episodes came first, but we're going to start with Bane's episodes. So the first installment of Bane's arc is episode 4, titled The Good Life. Kind of ironic in a way, because when you see a childhood childhood Bane, he's very clearly not living a good life. But he does get the promise of a good life later on, as we do see, right? So at the start of the episode, we are introduced to Child Bane, which I did not know we needed until this episode. I really, really enjoyed watching Bane as a child and his interactions with his childhood friend. And what was interesting about the style of storytelling given to us this episode was we were constantly guessing, or at least myself, whether or not that was in fact childhood Bane, or whether the older man, who's a Duros as well, the same species as Bane, was Bane himself. And so my thought initially was, I thought that the child was Bane. Then I started questioning whether the man was Bane. And then it wasn't until he spoke that I heard his voice that I realized, okay, that's definitely not Bane. But then the thought crossed my mind, maybe he just sounds like that because he doesn't have his breathing tubes yet. Anyway, I like that they kind of left that a mystery to us, and you even saw that Bane's childhood friend, we learned his name later on is Nero, referred to Bane as Colby. So I think that was meant to throw us off, because obviously up until now we never knew Bane's true name. So now we know that Bane is his street name, Cad Bane. So that was kind of cool, that whole mystery element. During this episode, we see that Bane, young Bane, and his childhood friend are very clearly struggling for money. They seem to be on their own. Bane even mentions that he doesn't really remember his parents or didn't really know them. And I assume that Nero had the same kind of upbringing where he didn't really know his parents, or maybe he lost his parents at a young age. I don't remember if they actually specifically addressed that part. But nonetheless, they're two kids essentially on their own, and they're struggling. They're basically stealing, but not stealing anything. They're stealing food, and you know when someone is stealing food that they're in a desperate situation. So it actually makes you empathize with them a lot. We see that this older man has been observing Bane and his friend for quite some time. He sees what they're going through, and one day he makes them an offer to essentially do work with him. While they distract the owner of one of the stores, Bane and his posse go in and essentially rob the place and end up killing the store owner in the process. And that is their first exposure to the dangers of this job, and I guess how serious things can get as well. They end up being pursued by law enforcement. Bane and the others get away, but unfortunately Nero is the one that gets left behind and is arrested. The man, whose name we later learn is Laszlo, he is not at all bothered by the fact that Nero got arrested, and he instead tries to cheer Bane up by saying, hey, at least you get his share now, which kind of just shows us what this world really is like. This lawless world, it pretty much all is about money and survival. And so, yeah, like that's basically how they justify others getting left behind or killed or whatnot. And it's ironic because that's also what Ventress mentions during her episodes, which is that in this business, you have no friends. I found it ironic, though, how Laszlo said, welcome to the family. Given that it was so easy for him to leave Nero behind, I would be questioning at this point, as a young Bane, well, wouldn't he be able to do the same thing to me? And am I really family? And he even risked Nero and Bane's lives as well, because they very easily could have gotten hurt or killed while they were working for him, distracting the store owner. So it didn't really seem like Laszlo cared about any of that. It just seemed like he was only in it to serve his own interests, and he kind of just used the kids to ultimately get the job done. So yeah, it's definitely a very selfish field, you could say, in the sense that everybody just looks out for themselves. And ironically, if you think of the Clone Wars, Bane kind of did that as well to Hardin / Obi-Wan. He had no problem leaving him behind the first chance he got. I just seem to recall that scene where he kicks him off the ship. So at the end of episode 4, my thoughts are, is his friend going to resent him for this and feel as though Bane abandoned him? And of course, we get our answer in the next episode when we see what became of his friend afterwards. I also was thinking at this moment that Laszlo is wearing Bane's signature hat, or one of Bane's signature hats. I think he has a couple. So I was actually thinking that maybe somehow Bane might kill Laszlo and then take his position and thus wear his hat. But in any event, you definitely get the sense that this hat is a symbol of power. Whoever wears it has power in the group and is essentially looked up to as the leader in the group. We have that feeling that eventually this role will fall to Bane, as it does, as we see in one of the later episodes. Side note as well, the end credit music that played at the end of episode 4 and that played in the later episodes, I believe is the same music that played at the end of the Clone Wars season 1 finale when Bane was breaking Zero out of prison.
I don't work for free.
I suppose that's probably Bane's signature theme. All right, so then in the next episode, it is titled A Good Turn. And in this episode, we do get confirmation that the young Colby is in fact Bane. We see that he is older now, so we know that some time has passed. And pretty early on in the episode, we learned that the group leader, whose name is Laszlo, was killed in a mission gone wrong. And the other crew member kind of let Laszlo's hat fall from his hands as he was dying, and then the hat kind of rolled and landed at Bane's feet, which of course tells us what I was suspecting, and that is the fact that Bane is now going to wear this hat and essentially take Laszlo's position as the new leader. We see in this episode as well that Bane appears to be in a relationship with this woman, and I will tell you guys, I saw her hold her stomach twice. And it did make me question whether or not she was pregnant. And then, of course, later on, we find that that is the case. So we'll get a little bit more into that later. But we see that Bane has some sort of life. He has his woman and he's doing work with his crew. And so when he finds out that the boss has been killed, he is essentially determined to get revenge. We see that Bane goes back to his hometown to find out more about what happened regarding Laszlo's death. And then he runs into none other than Nero himself, his childhood friend. And at first the reunion seems positive, pretty amicable. But my thought at the time was, is his friend just pretending? But deep down, he actually carries a lot of resentment for what happened all those years ago. But then we find out that Nero is actually in law enforcement. He is a deputy. And I found that this was a really interesting dynamic, given that both Bane and Nero came up together, the same upbringing, both grew up poor, but they essentially ended up on opposite ends of the law. It kind of makes you realize how close each and every one of us is to having gone down a completely different path. Two people can experience the same level of loss and they can go down completely different paths, right? Look at what loss did to Anakin even, and the path that it made him go down, versus Ahsoka, who never actually went to the dark side despite having experienced loss herself. So yeah, we really just kind of see that come into play here, where Bane and his childhood friend end up on opposite ends of the law. There was a pretty striking scene from this episode in which Bane is looking through the glass of one of the old shops that he and Nero used to visit, or at least walked by when they were younger. And he sees his younger self in the reflection, and then he shoots the glass, essentially shattering not only the glass, but the image of his younger self. Basically to say that that version of Bane is definitely dead and gone, and he is a completely new person now, as his new name suggests. It's not long before authorities come to confront Bane, and at the time, we see a marshal who is not Nero, it's another man. Then a classic cowboy shootout scene ensues, which we've seen multiple times before. With Bane, we even saw it in Book of Boba Fett, for example. We saw it in the Clone Wars Unfinished Stories. And so now we kind of see that Bane has had some practice with this. So as soon as this happens, you know right away that it's not going to end well for the Marshal. And it doesn't. Bane does kill him. And another thought going through my mind at the time was whether or not we're going to see this showdown happen again, but next time against his childhood friend instead. But what was ironic about the scene is that Nero essentially came to try and save Bane, both from authorities but also from himself. I think he didn't want his friend to stoop down to even lower levels than he already had. That's the way that Nero was looking at it. But in him coming and calling Bane's name, I believe actually he referred to him as Colby at the time, if I'm not mistaken, which would mean that he still sees him as his childhood friend. That would probably be almost offensive in a way to Bane, because he doesn't look at himself as being Colby, he looks at himself as being a new person, which is Cad. It'd be like calling Darth Vader Anakin, right? That him being called Anakin would kind of remind him of all the pain that he went through prior to becoming Darth Vader. So in the same way, I think we're seeing something similar here with Cad Bane, not wanting to be reminded of who he used to be. So anyways, Nero calls out his name, and that is ironically what led to the death of the Marshal, I would argue, because the Marshal kind of got distracted, and that left an opening, a very brief opening, for Bane to fire the fatal shot. In that process, Bane's girl also got shot, although not fatally. Actually, as I'm saying this, we later find out that she passed away. I'm wondering if that shot ended up being fatal. At first it looked like just a shoulder shot, but maybe it actually had caused more damage than we're led to believe. But anyways, I think Nero kind of caused that whole situation to escalate, you could say. We then see that Bane's girl disarmed him when he wasn't looking and tossed his weapon, and thus this led to Bane's arrest and eventual imprisonment. You could argue that both his girlfriend and Nero were trying to save Bane, like I said, from the authorities, but also from himself. But I could also see how that would really make Bane upset. I could see him eventually resenting both his girlfriend and his childhood friend. And of course, we see how that plays out in the following episode. But it makes sense because his girlfriend knew at the time that she was pregnant. And so she did even say to him, there's more at stake than you realize. So that it kind of explains her actions a little bit more. She was looking out for him and the future of their child. We then move on into episode 6, which is titled One Good Deed. We see that the neighborhood,
In this neighborhood?
the same neighborhood that we've seen in the previous 2 episodes, looks a lot safer now. It looks a lot more livable, for lack of a better word. You could see all the greenery, people are outside playing, enjoying themselves. And so you definitely get the sense that some time has passed. And we do learn that this is the case, that Bane has been put away for some time and is facing 5 years. We see that a couple members of Bane's old crew show up, and also we learn that Bane is being let out early. So this leads us to believe that Bane is likely on his way to settle the score once and for all between him and his childhood friend Nero. So while we are in the station and Nero is being warned of Bane's imminent arrival, we see a young kid who looks an awful lot like Bane. And of course, my first thought was that must be Bane's kid, but then he calls Nero Papa. So then I think, well, okay, is it his kid? Maybe it's not his kid. Based on the way the scenes were going and how Nero was saying Bane doesn't know the full story of what happened with his girl, I very quickly started to get the idea that that is probably Bane's kid, but he is just taking care of him for now while his father is in prison. Some people are talking in this town. It would appear, based on what they're saying, that Nero married Bane's girlfriend, and also now their kid is living with them. And so at the time I was thinking, oh my gosh, that is so foul. I could definitely see that Bane is going to want to kill this guy for that, not only for getting him in prison, but taking his girlfriend and raising his kid. Like, oh my goodness, just messy. But then we of course later find out that that's not quite the case, and there's a lot more to that story where that came from. We see some scenes of Nero in the town, and there's even a scene where he sees some kids run by him, and you could tell that it obviously reminds him of himself and Bane when they were younger. And then eventually we get to there being a final showdown between Bane and his childhood friend, which was the feeling I got from the previous episode. You kind of thought that maybe there'd be another classic cowboy showdown, so to speak. And this is where things get pretty sad. We actually find out that Aaron passed away, and at first you're not 100% sure if Nero's telling the truth, but you quickly realize that he is. And as I mentioned just not long ago, I'm realizing that she probably passed away from the blaster shot, and because we never saw her after that, so even though it didn't look like a fatal wound, it might have ended up being a fatal wound by the sounds of it, according to what Nero's saying. But for some reason, unbeknownst to me, he very much holds off on telling Bane the full truth. I'm not quite sure why he didn't tell Bane right away that that's his son. I don't know. I guess he figured that certain things were better left unsaid. Maybe he was conflicted because maybe perhaps the girlfriend Erin did not want Bane to know that that was his son. I don't know, but for some reason he doesn't. They engage in a showdown, and this results in Nero's death. And of course, Bane's son goes up to Nero and is crying over his body. Bane says to Nero, "You took everything from me." And then of course Nero responds to that saying, "Not everything." And you could tell by the way Bane looks at the kid, and the kid whose name's Isaac, and the way Isaac looks at Bane realizes in that moment that is his child. And I think from the look on Bane's face, he had a moment of realization of everything that he lost and essentially sacrificed for his new way of life. But even despite knowing all that, he still chooses to walk away because he knows that the life he has does not allow him to be a father, and he really essentially can't have any attachments if he's going to do what he's doing. And it kind of makes sense as to why later on you see that he's riding solo a lot of the times. He does every now and then work with people, but for the most part he kind of is by himself. I think he doesn't really want to deal with having a responsibility over anyone and potentially dealing with that loss again. So it's just easier if he's on his own. But yeah, I think overall it was just kind of tragic in a way. This was a tragic tale of two really great friends who were essentially torn apart over life differences. The main difference being that his friend was caught and arrested that day while Bane got away. You kind of have to wonder what it would have been like if Nero had gotten away with them also. Would they have both become criminals? Would Nero have eventually gone a different route? Would Bane have eventually gone a different route? What if Bane had gotten caught that day as well? Would he have also become a deputy? All these questions kind of run through your head, but ultimately it's just so sad because you have two kids that came from the same background and upbringing, and it's just so sad to see how different they ended up becoming with time and with age. And Nero ultimately lost his life, I think, trying to save his friend. I think he always kind of saw the good in Bane because he knew who he was before everything, but ultimately he wasn't able to save him. And so yeah, I don't know, I just think that was all really sad. But again, I think those episodes were just so well done and really fleshed out Bane's character a lot more. I think it makes Bane so much more likable in my opinion, even though he was introduced in the Clone Wars as a villain technically. These episodes just show that there's so many layers to him and it's really not so black and white, and oftentimes your life circumstances can cause you to go down a dark path that eventually you're not able to come back from, and we saw a good example of that. So yeah, in my opinion, I like Bane a lot more after watching this, even though he has beef with my girl Ahsoka. I have not forgotten that. In another universe, I would love to have seen the two of them team up in a similar way that Ahsoka and Ventress teamed up. Fingers crossed, maybe somehow that'd be possible. Overall, guys, I loved Bane's arc. You guys let me know what you thought down below in the comment section, and as always, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video where we will break down Ventress's episodes. Until next time, guys, take care, see you soon, and may the 4th be with you.